Everybody joining me on today's show is a good friend of the program. I always go to this guy to talk Georgia Bulldogs. We got to go. We have to talk about the now back-to-back defending national champion Georgia Bulldogs. And joining me, as always, is Palmer Thombs from Dogs HQ, part of the On Three Sports Network. And Palmer, good to talk to you. I appreciate you making the time today.
Always happy to come on here, Phillip, and talk about Georgia football, and excited that we're talking about football again, because baseball season's not going well for the Dogs. Basketball season did not go well for the Dogs, and so the fact that football is back in high gear, it's always a talking point in Athens, Georgia, but even more so when you can hear the whistles blowing from the practice fields over there.
Yeah, but it's never really ends though. The season, the games end, but
Yeah,
it never really ends.
To say that football season is back implies that it ever ended.
Yeah, I'm gonna do what Josh Pate does over at 247. I'm gonna say off season is not allowed. It's just not a word. It just that because I mean, with everything that you have to, just cover one team or cover the whole sport, just everything going on. I know the transfer portal ends, but still, you're talking about that. And I mean, it's just like I said, the rule change.
There's an up season and a down season, and the down season might not be all that down.
Yeah, that's true. You may get a nap in and get you a little break from everything going on. But this Georgia Bulldog team, like I said, back-to-back national champions. They recently got going with spring. They will be playing their spring game on the 14th. 15th of April. I was looking at started March 5th, 14th, and I had hit these numbers all jumbled up. But they'll be playing on April 15th. But just for you, going into this spring camp for this team, what are the big storylines?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest is obviously the quarterback position. Feels like it's been forever that Stetson Bennett has been at Georgia and been the quarterback there. And, obviously now that he is gone, you turn and you look at the guys that are left on this roster, and it's an incredibly talented group. I mean, every position is very talented, and I feel like you don't get to see that as much at quarterback, the entirety of that room, because just one guy plays. Maybe you see glimpses of a second guy in a game that's a blowout, but typically people are turning the channels unless you're a diehard Georgia only fan. But as you look at this room, Carson Beck entering his fourth season with the program out of Jacksonville area. He is was a 4-star coming out of high school. Has the most experience of these quarterbacks. But he doesn't have any starting experience. And in fact, last year, 2021, he came into the fall as the backup, and Stetson was out of the picture. And all of a sudden, when JT Daniels was unavailable to start the UAB game, it ended up being Stetson, and he surpassed Carson Beck on that depth chart. And so he's had to wait a little bit longer than he probably thought he was going to have to. Further down the depth chart, you've got Brock Vandegrift, who's an Athens area native, out of Prince Academy, and the highest rated of the three contenders there. He was a 5-star, the only 5-star of the group, top 10 quarterback. Obviously, when you're a 5-star, you're in that upper echelon there, and he's a bigger guy, talented, with his legs, has a good arm. Probably not the pure pocket passer that you've got in Carson Beck. But Beck may not be the athlete that Stetson Bennett was, or that Brock Vandegrift is, and can be. And then the kind of wild card here is a third guy. Vandegrift entering his third year. This third guy, Gunnar Stockton, is entering his second. Did not see any action this past season. Brock Vandegrift hasn't completed a pass in 2 years on the roster. Gunnar, like I said, did not see any action, was the fourth quarterback. Reviews of him from the scout team were great, but you can only read so much into that. That's obviously the biggest storyline with this team, is who is going to be the guy that replaces Stetson Bennett, the 2-time national championship starting quarterback Stetson Bennett. words that we never thought we might say. And so, who's going to be that guy? That's very clearly the biggest storyline of the spring. And I'm not sure that it's going to be settled this spring. I think that we may have an idea of who may have an upper hand. And if one of these guys ends up transferring in the second transfer portal window that opens in May, you're definitely going to know that guy's out of it, and that somebody else has the upper hand. But I really think Kirby's going to carry this into the season and into the fall camp, and to try to keep these guys around, to keep some depth around. They did not sign a quarterback in this past class, so those are the only 3 quarterbacks that they've got on scholarship. And you're probably not going to be able to add somebody from that transfer portal window because nobody wants to come in and be a backup. Nobody, and Kirby's not going to start a guy that hasn't been there. So, maybe he'll make me eat my words, knowing that, but they feel very confident with the 3 quarterbacks they've got. They would love to have those 3 on the roster. They would, I think when you look at this schedule, the way that it starts out, especially, with 3 of your first 4 games being, lesser opponents. You've got UT Martin, who's an FCS opponent, Ball State, who's not a Power 5, South Carolina's in there, but you get them at home. And then, the 4th opponent, UAB, you also get at home. Your 5th opponent, you get at home in Auburn. You've got a really manageable schedule. It's never easy in the SEC, but you've got a manageable schedule that you can figure out your quarterback situation early in the season if you don't figure it out this spring. So there's your biggest storyline of the spring. We could talk about that for the entirety of this podcast, but I know that's not everything that's going on in Athens.
Yeah, with the quarterbacks too, obviously a guy I'm familiar with, but new offensive coordinator Mike Bobo. And look, you would probably expect, okay, it's going to be the same playbook, same ideas, but Bobo is going to call probably a different play in a situation that maybe Todd Monken would. And look, I'm not going to lie to you, Palmer. I've been critical of Bobo in the past. I feel like sometimes he'll run the ball with a great running back, Todd Gurley, Tate Bixby, and if for some reason he gets into inside 10-yard line, he gets pass happy. But I don't think he's a bad coordinator. But like I said, I've had my criticisms of Bobo. But where are you?
Trust me, plenty of Georgia fans have too.
Yeah. Yeah, and now because you're the Auburn side, and then he's South Carolina, Bobo's just going to touch every SEC team before it's over with.
Yeah.
But what's your thoughts on Mike Bobo taking over for Todd Monken?
What we've heard is that they, like you said, they're going to try to keep the same verbiage. They're going to try to keep the same terminology because, quite frankly, why would you change anything? It's worked. The philosophy, like you said, the specific. This play call here, that play call there, that's going to change because it's a different mind that's making those calls. But in terms of the offense itself and what it should look like, I don't think it's going to change all that much. What might change it more is the personnel that you've got. Going back to the quarterbacks, are you going to have a quarterback that is, sit back in the pocket and throw some dimes out to wide receivers? Or are you going to have a guy that you feel comfortable using their legs like they had in Stetson Bennett, like they could have in Gunnar Stockton or Brock Vandegrift? And Carson Beck, Kirby has said this, doesn't get enough credit for the athlete that he is. He was one hell of a baseball player before he was one hell of a football player. And so, incredibly talented athlete as a whole, but maybe not the runner. You don't have Darnell Washington around, who was a 6'7", 6'8", 280 pound freak at tight end. You don't have a guy like that where you can have an extra offensive tackle out there without actually putting an extra offensive lineman out there. So how does that change? Are you going to run as much 2 tight end sets, or are you just going to rely on one and getting it done with Brock Bowers, which is a weapon that could be a part of the play calling? And ultimately I think that Kirby trusts Mike Bobo. They're friends, for better or for worse, they are friends. And, if things aren't going well, people are going to hate it. If things are going well, they're going to say, well, look at, that's just what happens when you got buddies that are working together. So for better or for worse, they have a really great relationship. Kirby has coached against Bobo, during his time as the OC when Kirby was the DC at Alabama and Bobo was the OC at Georgia. When Kirby was the head coach here at Georgia and Bobo was the OC at South Carolina. Well, actually, he was the interim head coach that game because Will Muschamp, also on this staff and also a good friend of theirs, had been fired, and that was Bobo's first game as the interim. But interim head coach, offensive coordinator there, and the offensive coordinator at Auburn. And Kirby actually said that those experiences coaching against him is what gives him so much confidence in Bobo as an offensive coordinator. He said, look, that 2021 Auburn game, obviously the entirety of that season maybe wasn't the best indicator of how great of a play caller Mike Bobo can be. But if you go look at that first drive of that 2021 Georgia Auburn game, keep in mind, this is a generationally good Georgia defense. I think Auburn went on like a 15-play drive that did end in a field goal, but it was really impressive. And they moved the ball seemingly with ease against a really good Georgia defense. So, if he can do that with, maybe less talent at Auburn or less talent at South Carolina, than what he's going to have at Georgia, and do that against a defense like Georgia's, why would you not believe in Mike Bobo as an option for Georgia here? So, I think that we're going to see a lot of what Todd Monken was doing, but it certainly will be interesting to see how he plays his cards there in terms of what play call when.
Just looking, I'm very impressed what Georgia did transfer portal, at receiver, bringing in Dominant Lovett out of Missouri, really good receiver there. Ra Thomas from Mississippi State, not from too far where I'm at, from the Eufaula area. But I'll ask you about the running backs because, and of course, y'all had the story up on Monday. Kendall Milton injury, he's out for the rest of the spring. Paul, when I watched Georgia the last 2 years, they always had a back that was a threat out of the backfield. Milton could have been that guy. I know Kenny McIntosh was that guy last season with 43 catches, over 500 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Do you see a guy in this running back group that could fill that role?
Maybe. And like you said, if it's going to be anyone, I think it could be Kendall Milton. I've got a lot more confidence in him as a pass catcher than I do Dejan Edwards, who's a proven guy, a bigger downhill back that's going to run between the tackles and get those tough yards. And you need a guy like that. Do I think that he can improve as a pass catcher? I do. I mean, he's proven that he can do it, maybe not as well as a Kenny McIntosh, a James Cook, as, Zamir White was solid as a pass catching back. And, like I said, Kendall Milton as well. So I think that Milton, if you're gonna circle one of these guys as, hey, this is going to be the option for Georgia out of the backfield, I would say Milton, and I would also look at the freshman Roderick Robinson, because I think that he did a little bit of that in high school out at Lincoln School there in San Diego, California. Branson Robinson, these guys are going to get us so confused with 2 Robinsons in the backfield. Branson, who's a second year, Roderick, who's a first year. Branson is more of a big downhill back, but can catch the ball out of the backfield. I think that they're not recruiting guys that can't do it. It's more just about who's going to be the guy that they call on to do it most. And if I had to guess right now, I would say Kendall Milton is that guy. But I think that with the injury to him this spring, there's a huge opportunity for these other guys to grow and develop that aspect of their game, because that is an aspect of a Mike Bobo offense. They like getting the ball to the backs out of the backfield.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's been something he's seen. I mean, he did it at Auburn with Bigsby and Hunter. I remember him doing it with Gurley when he was at Georgia in his first stint there. I remember him doing that a lot. Defense. Now, Palmer, I'm going to say this. I was looking at some numbers on Georgia's defense. I think they're slipping. In 2021, 9.5 points per game allowed. Last season, 12.8 points per game allowed. So I'm that's a 3-point jump. So Georgia Kirby has got to get a hold on his defense. And of course I joke with everybody, but it's kind of the same thing last year. You're going to hear the same thing. Mount, they lost all these guys. They lose Jalen Carter, the linebackers Robert Beal and Nolan Smith. In the secondary, you've got Kaylee Ringo and Chris Smith out there. And when I see those names, I see leadership. Obviously, talent is there. But who are the guys on this defense you see could step up and fill in the roles of those guys that are departing?
Yeah, I mean, they lose less than they did last year, which I think is incredible to look at and incredible to think about the possibilities for this 2023 defense. I think they've got a chance to be as good as that 21 defense that we were just talking about being so generationally good. And that's because of the experience that they have on the defensive line. Do they have a player that is Jalen Carter talent level? Probably not. I mean, at least on the interior, Mykel Williams could be that guy off the edge, more so of a defensive end. And, I think when you're comparing him, you would probably compare him to a Trayvon Walker more than you would a Jalen Carter. But I think Bear Alexander, who's a second-year player, like Williams is, I think he's a guy that's going to step up and, played important snaps for Georgia when Jalen was out this past season and is going to play important snaps for Georgia without Jalen this season. You've also got a lot of, you talk about losing leadership. You've also got a lot of leadership on that defensive line. Some veteran guys that have been around the program for 3, 4, going on 5 years now. Tramel Walthour is a guy that started games for them at the edge. I think Mykel Williams outsnapped him last year, and Williams is the better player of the two. But it's great to have a guy like that can, A, provide leadership and experience, and B, provide depth. Zion Logue, Nazir Stackhouse, Warren Brinson, those guys on the interior. And then they've got really talented guys that they can bring along. Jordan Hall is should have been a consensus 5-star, 5-star plus player. ESPN was the only one that did not have him as a 5-star. And they, in my opinion, very much downplayed his ranking there. He was in, I think, the 150s, and everyone else had him in the top 20. So, take that for what you want. I think he's the best defensive lineman that's coming to college this year. The second level at linebacker, Smile Munden might have been the best linebacker in college football the second half of the year. Battled some injuries early on in the year, and Jamon Dumas-Johnson looked like he was going to be – he was actually the one that was up a finalist for the Butkus Award. But I think Smile Munden was the better linebacker of the two. You've got Jalen Walker there on the inside that was a really talented player as a freshman. I mentioned those second-year players. Mykel Williams, Bear Alexander, Jalen Walker, all three of them had sacks in the national championship game. That's as true freshmen. They're going into their second year on this defense and going to play a big part. Marvin Jones Jr., who comes from a very athletic family, he was a 5-star coming out of high school. He's going to have to step up on the edge there. Chaz Chambliss is another guy, a little bit more experienced, is entering his third season with the program. Got a lot of snaps last year when Nolan Smith went down. Robert Beal was banged up at times. Chaz was banged up at times. And so Marvin Jones got snaps. I think Darius Smith is somebody that's going to come along. And you look at the guys that they brought in at that position, they brought in 3 of the top 10 edges in the country, outside linebackers in the country to that position group. Damon Wilson was a 5-star. Sam Mpemba, Gabe Harris, both very, very talented 4s. Top 100 players there. And then in the secondary, again, you've got really talented players that are back. Javon Bullard won defensive MVP of the national championship game with 3 turnovers forced in the first half. He didn't play at all in the second half. He was on the sideline with his shoulder in a sling. It popped out during that game and still forced 3 turnovers. Kamari Lassiter is maybe the better corner of the two that Georgia had last year with Keely Ringo opposite of him. You're going to have to find a guy to replace Keely Ringo. You're going to have to find a guy to replace Chris Smith. By the way, I didn't mention Malachi Starks, really talented safety. You mentioned the transfers that they brought in on the offensive side of the football in Ra Thomas and Dominic Lovett. They brought one in on the defensive side of the football for that backfield, also from the SEC, Smoke Bowie. So they've got a lot of talented options. The way that they cross-train that secondary, they play guys at multiple positions. They train them up, and they get them ready to play. So, if you're training at corner, you're also going to get some work in at star. If you're working at star, you're probably going to work at safety as well. If you're getting training at all three of those spots. So Javon Bullard has been getting some reps at safety this spring. Maybe he ends up being the guy, moving from that star position to play right next to Malachi Starks at safety. And then you plug and play Smoke Bowie or one of the talented freshman corners that they've got coming in. Dalen Everett is a guy that was a top 10 corner. They are loaded on that defensive side of the football, probably more so. I think I feel safe in saying this. They have recruited players better on that defensive side of the football than they have on offense. And that says a lot because they've recruited pretty darn well on offense too. But the amount of talent that they've got on that defense and the amount of talent that they've got returning, experienced talent, guys that are talented, that got, maybe their feet wet and are stepping into bigger roles. The sky's the limit for this 2023 Georgia defense.
Yeah, and with that talent level, you're right. I mean, you're looking at SEC teams. You're not going to score in Georgia again. I was in jest earlier that they were slipping, but they're not. That is, it's only getting better over in Athens. The last thing, and this is it does relate to Kirby Smart, but it's also a college football question overall, obviously, and it looks like we should expect this change to be coming to college football, and with the rules and with the clock. The main one is no longer clock stopping at the first downs unless it's under 2 minutes left in the half. I'm for it. I'm for more of the NFL way of doing that because we have so many spread offenses now where they throwing the ball and incompletions stopping the clock. I'm all for it. But what are your thoughts on the potential changes coming for college football?
I don't know that they're going to make that big of a difference because, incompletions absolutely hurt. Incompletions absolutely hurt the pace of this game. But the clock doesn't stop when they go out of bounds over, I want to say it's 4 minutes now, outside of the final 4 minutes of the half. I don't think it stops. Incompletions would, not stopping it after an incompletion would absolutely hurt it. It would be interesting. It would be really, really interesting. I do think that where that hurts is a team's ability to come back in a game. It would shorten the game, and it would shorten it in a way that makes it harder to come back because when you're trailing, let's say you're down by 2 touchdowns in the early third quarter, you're gonna go to the air some. You're gonna throw it out, air it out some, throw it around. And you're going to try to get back in the game that way because if the ball hits the ground, clock stops, you come back to the line of scrimmage and you can reset and everything. And, it definitely slows down the pace of the game. But I think that it helps the competitiveness of the games maybe. So the rule change, it's one that Kirby has been a big proponent of because he wants to see less snaps, less opportunities for players to get hurt, especially if you're going to end up expanding the playoff, which is happening. You cannot have these guys playing, as many snaps as they are every game. So I think it's a good change. I don't know how much of an impact it will actually make in terms of speeding up the game and getting games over with quicker. But I think that for players, I think it'll be good to see less opportunities for them to get hurt.
Well, the length of games too, and I told you this off air, with CBS no longer being part of the SEC, that'll help out because those CBS games take forever watching them. They'll kick off at 2:30 Central Time, and it'd be about 6:30 before a lot of them. Because advertising. But I don't blame on that part. That's not going to change on the commercial side of it. Can't change that part. But anyways, Palmer, it's been fun having you on the show as always, talking all things Georgia football and the landscape of college football as well. But if the listeners and viewers want to follow you online, where can they find you and all the work you're doing?
Yeah, you can come find us over at DawgsHQ. We've got you covered. $29.99 gets you full access to our website through the summer up to the start of this next football season. August 31st is your date there. We've got spring practice notes, recruiting notes. We're about to be headed into a big time for recruiting this summer. Georgia's got the #1 class for 2024 and 2025 for what that's worth right now. So we're going to have recruiting notes. We're going to have team notes, and we'll have you covered on all aspects over at DawgsHQ. So come check us out. And you can find me on social media at Palmer Thombs.
All right. Sounds good, Palmer. Once again, I appreciate the time, and I look forward to talking again sometime down the road.
Thanks, Phillip.